Episode 27 of the Average Joe Sports Show. Winter conditioning underway for the Big Red.
Mitch Sherman here. We're going to talk about Husker hoops back in the spotlight and Rienk Mast's big evening at PBA.
Hi, it's Bill Doleman, and we will talk about Ed Foley, who found his way to the greater Fairbury metropolitan area.
It's Elijah Herbel here. Let's talk about some rocks, huh?
Welcome to it. It's episode 27 of the Average Joe Sports Show. Mitch Sherman, Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. Give us a follow, give us a like, and a review with the Average Joe Sports Show. Can subscribe on YouTube is where you can watch it at AJ Sports Show. It's where you find it on Twitter/X at AJ Sports Pod. Is it spring football yet, fellas?
Well, it's not the off season, that's for sure. Right?
No, there is no off season.
A friend of mine told me it was a couple of Thursdays ago between 2 and 2:45 a.m. That was the off season for Nebraska football.
That's
always football season in Nebraska, and right now it's recruiting season again. And these coaches, Matt Rule was in Hawaii, and Ed Foley's back on the road. I think the highlight of the Nebraska coaching staff and their travels has always got to be Ed Foley, because he does not miss an opportunity to take a picture of his visits, whether it's around the state of Nebraska. He goes into Iowa. He'll get out into Pennsylvania, where some of his roots are. And he places stickers all over the schools, or magnets on the schools, to mark his territory. And Bill, we're a minute into this episode. That is the safe way to mark his territory. Yeah. He made a stop this week at Fairbury High School, which must have incredible significance to you.
Well, it does. But I'd heard, and as I mentioned to everybody in our pre-production meeting, of course, they've opened up more flights, to get more and more people in and out of Fairbury a little more efficiently, which has been needed for a long time. So it's great.
It is the international airport. Right, it's up and running.
Yeah. It's semantics, but for Ed Foley to be able to get in and take advantage of the new travel opportunities to and from Fairbury, I think it's pretty significant. Knowing that Kansas is a suburb of Fairbury, it's easy to find it on the map, and to tap into the talent that is no doubt being groomed and grown in the greater Fairbury metropolitan area. And I'm proud. I'm proud of it.
If nothing else, you're getting a pipeline to hot dogs for your stadium, if nothing else.
Well, at least the brand name anyway. Yeah.
Well, let's dive in a little bit to this offseason. We'll get to some Husker hoops as well. Nice win for the Big Red over Ohio State. But, guys, the excitement's there for Nebraska football fans with, of course, Dylan Raiola and what the expectations are, but more so you can couple that with what's coming back, with what Nebraska did in the portal, and just the excitement that exists with the team building and chemistry that, can go upward from a pretty good year one under Matt Rule.
Yeah, we're done talking about Ed. I want to talk more about Ed.
No, we're getting back to Ed, but that's part of the chemistry part. He's going out and finding the right dudes from the smaller towns.
Absolutely. So we got mat drills coming up. That's MAT after the mat. They're not named after the head coach, which was confusing to me last year when these things got started. So we're already in year two, and we're already starting to understand how some of the mechanics of Nebraska football in the offseason work, how the wheels turn. And a big part of what this team does this year it's January 22nd when the spring semester starts, all the way up until a week or two before spring practice, is this mat drill concept. And a lot of it is competitions and training and really hardcore workouts that take place on mats or turf or on the snow, the frozen ground of Memorial Stadium. Last year, we famously saw them pushing sleds blocking sleds across the frozen turf out in the stadium. I'm sure we'll get that again at some point this year. But it's really it's a bonding experience for the team. They divide up and we get names for the different teams, and they go out and they do community service, and they attend events on campus. So this is really a new aspect of Nebraska football that Matt Rule has brought in, and it's that time of year. So get ready for your social media channels to be filled up with mat drills and small team competitions.
And I'll be curious to see who has a bigger body transformation here in the spring. Some of these incoming freshmen, the early enrollees, or Chris Schmidt with what we saw in the past 6 months with him.
Wow. Down 30.
That's a compliment.
I know.
As much fun as these things are to track and to follow along, as Mitch follows along a little bit more intently, but I do think that it is something that had a significant impact on the direction of Nebraska football, not just going into winter conditioning last year and spring ball, but I think even in the ups and the downs of the 23 campaign and the 13-10 losses and the last-second kicks, that team still stayed together pretty cohesively, and the camaraderie and the chemistry is a really big thing that I think had been lost over a long period of time. But I think that what they do in these moments, and again, it's kind of fun to follow along and see which team does whatever and who actually wins. But I think that goes along with why Ty Robinson wanted to come back. And players have talked about wanting to be a part of this program again, and it's tough to either step away like Nick Heinrich or some of the other guys that, have had a chance to move on or to stay. And why Nebraska did not have a lot of guys jump into the transfer portal. And a lot of names that were in the transfer portal, people weren't familiar with. But people want to be around the program. And I think that began really with those drills that were kind of fun, but I think it paid off in a really big way. As well as the travels of Ed Foley in his van down by the river around the state of Nebraska.
Yeah, let's get back to that. So one person who also could undergo a body transformation this time of year is Ed Foley. But it would be in the wrong direction.
Sure.
Because of all of the great spots that he's stopping along the way. Last year was like drinking from the fire hose for Coach Foley. Like every night that he was on the road in the state of Nebraska, he was, going to Bob's in Martinsburg, or he was experiencing Runza for the first time.
Kolaches in Wilbur.
Right. He will, and it can be an urban experience. It can be a rural experience. He does not, he shows no prejudice, no favoritism. He will go to pretty much any restaurant that's recommended to him. On Tuesday night of this week, he was tweeting from Talus in Papillion, which is an upscale new spot, and had a meal on his plate that looks good. He needs to tap into like some sponsorships or, something in order to make this, more than just a little bit of Twitter fun for everybody. I ran into Ed. I think I can divulge this. I ran into him at the Gretna Papillion South basketball game on Tuesday night. And he had a full day that started in Wahoo, and he went to UTAN, and he was at Gretna East, which I heard about immediately when he walked into the building through the well-placed sources, i.e. my daughter that I have in the hallways there at Gretna East. And then he took in a basketball game at Gretna High last night that, to be honest, didn't feature necessarily a bunch of future Power 5 talent. Gretna does have a lineman who is getting some looks, who plays on the basketball team, but Ed's just being Ed, man. The people, he wants to be out at these places. He stayed the entire game for 10 minutes after the game, just talking to people, chatting it up. Like, I don't know. It's been a while since Nebraska's seen an assistant coach like this. Dan Young, back in his day, was kind of like this. Uncle Milt, but Uncle Milt didn't like tour the state, every spring and every fall. I mean, people came to him and, and would sit around and have a good time with Milt Teneper. Dan Young, being a former high school coach in the state in Omaha, in the state of Nebraska, he did some of this. But Ed is one of a kind, and he just loves being out among the people.
Ed is doing great work from an evaluation standpoint. The PR side of it's very important. But you talk to high school football coaches and folks in small town Nebraska and large town Nebraska, and all they want is an assistant coach to
connection
to stop by and give them their time and listen, right? And then if a kid isn't, you can't take everybody. Totally get that, especially in today's era of college football. But at least have the communication part of it from an evaluation standpoint, and let your eyes and the due diligence be a reality. And that is back, and the state appreciates that. And to your point about the food tours, I mean, I get a kick out of that. I love small town bars in Nebraska. I love Salisbury Steak Wednesdays at the diner. I mean, it just kind of brings me back to my grandparents in western Nebraska, right? So I smile at that, and he's getting to experience that. But it's something that, I mean, it's a part of his job that keeps him busy. But I would think Easy Ed loves that part of the job where he's out meeting and greeting and just doing the work. He loves probably going to a high school basketball game on a Tuesday.
He does. He enjoys it. And, there's no substitute for a person's time. And, you can talk a big game. You can have a press conference and say the right things. But until you've got boots on the ground, whether it's the head coach or the assistant coach who's in charge of building relationships at high schools and in communities around the state, until you actually get out there and show your face and sit there for an hour and a half on a Tuesday night at a basketball game. He was sitting with the parents from Gretna and just talking to people and educating them, letting them know what's going on at Nebraska. And, it inevitably turns into conversations that have nothing to do with football. He's talking about where he went to dinner, how it was icy in the morning in Wahoo and he almost got run over by a bus. And I mean, it's all kinds of just people being people. And, I do think that Nebraska football has missed and had gotten away from that, that experience, that element of just experiencing the personality of the program. And it's great to see that he's playing a big role in bringing it back. It doesn't win you games necessarily on Saturday, but what it can do is it can help bring you players that you otherwise might not have got, because people, when they know that Nebraska cares and that these coaches care, then that is going to have a domino effect that can help the roster in the long run. Yeah,
it's the connection. It is the relationship between the football program, the athletic department, and especially small town Nebraska. And the thing about it is, it's great that he took advantage of the flight opportunities to the greater Fairbury metropolitan area. But once you've gone, in Nebraska, if you go to one small town, I think most small towns feel like you visited them as well, because as the more you make a connection with a couple of them, others feel like they are making the effort to remember us, to visit us. And when they do actually come to your town, it's even a much bigger deal. And Ed Foley's creating a relationship with the state so much that if Matt Rule were to show up in Shickley, people there would probably say, "Hey, is Ed
Where's
coming?
Ed?
Is Ed coming?" Right?
Right. Right.
That's
No doubt.
because he has become like that Dan Young and Milt Tenneper persona. That if you're going to go to a small town, you're going to go to the Brunswick. You're going to have a Hams, or you're going to have a Schlitz, or you're going to have a Busch Light, whatever the case might be, but you're going to be one of them. And once you visited one, others feel that connection too, which has been lost. And it is so imperative as Nebraska moves on that you get people back invested with their hearts. They'll get invested a little bit more what they can with their wallets, and then they'll maybe buy a ticket in that brand new stadium that you're building around the old one.
Also a lot of these towns, a lot of these schools that he visits and that Nebraska coaches visit, whether it's in Texas or Pennsylvania or Florida or the state of Nebraska, they may not have a bunch of players or any players that the Huskers are recruiting. But when you do have that guy, And when that guy's in Ainsworth, Nebraska, and you go, it doesn't seem disingenuous.
Right.
If you've been there before or you've been to the other small town, it seems like you're truly invested. So that when Carter Nelson, pops up on the radar in Ainsworth, in Georgia and Notre Dame and Alabama are flying in to see him, there's something that separates Nebraska. There's a reason that you look at Nebraska differently if you're the people in that town and you're the Nelson family or you're the football coaches who coach in that town, because you know that they would be there anyway. They would come to some other town like it. And it I think it made a difference just this year in getting that player.
Quickly, guys, I don't want to derail the conversation here, but Mitch, you told the story of Ed Foley almost getting hit by a bus in Wahoo. And I'd like to fess up to the fact that I almost hit Ed Foley with my car last year. Have I told you guys this story?
No.
I thought you were going to say the guy that was in the bus.
Were you trying to take him out because he's coined or cornered the nacho cheese on hot dog market?
What have we just uncovered here?
No. So this was a Saturday morning, would have been last spring during spring football. And we finished up the Saturday morning show here. And I was going out to Wilderness Park to go take the dogs on a walk, I guess a ruck, if we want specifically, throw some weight on my back, go walk around. And
Way to go.
As I'm driving through downtown Lincoln, I'm going down 9th Street. And
there's it.
No. There's all that road construction that's like kind of right there as you get out of the roundabouts and get into downtown, kind of across from Barry's. And I'm driving in the far left lane next to like the concrete barriers. And as I'm about to pull up to that light right in front of Barry's, there's Ed Foley peeking around the corner of the concrete barriers trying to see if he can cross the street. And I go, whoa! And he gets back and like doesn't let me hit him with his car. So he has
Did you lay on the horn?
No, because I go, that was Ed Foley. And I wasn't going to be mad at Ed Foley. He was just trying to get across the street quickly. But it was a scary moment for a half second as he peeked around that corner. And I don't think I've ever told that story, but it was a bit of a shock on a Saturday morning to almost hit him with my car. What a tragedy that would have been.
Well, yeah.
This would have been the last episode.
That's an understatement.
Yeah, right.
Something tells me Schmidt and I wouldn't have gotten any good interviews after that one.
Well, yeah. Who you with? Oh, that guy with the mustache. Yeah. Took out my knee. So I want to just put a bow on the topic of like touring the state and in the connection. Guys, we've seen a boatload of transfers this winter from very high-profile programs, specifically Alabama with the coaching carousel. We've seen departures from Washington. Poor Chubba Purdy left Nebraska and was on, school number 4. He finally landed in Nevada. Good for him. I want Chubba to have a great career. But let me ask Mitch, do you think Nebraska has, I don't want to say an advantage, but there's some real genuine care behind this program. Part of the culture, part of how it's built, not just touring small towns and large towns, in-state, out-of-state for players that can help you win. But just from the top on down with Rule and his assistants, I mean, do you think guys feel cared for more than just, all right, you are supposed to catch a ball on 3rd and 9 for me and get the first down? Do you think that connection that Bill's talked about is going to put Nebraska in a better position for next season and beyond when it comes to guys maybe having an opportunity to leave for more money or different playing time?
Yeah, I think it's something that Matt Rule values and that he wants that to be. He wants that to be an advantage for his program. He wants to be able to appeal to kids to athletes, to, they're basically professional athletes, to these men in ways that go beyond their playing time, their star status, the number of games that they win. It can take you to a certain place. When it all boils down, they're going to win or not win for the same reasons mostly that just about every other program does. But, when there's a decision to be made and say Nebraska and Texas are in the race for somebody, or, there's a transfer portal decision to be made, school X is looking like an appealing destination for somebody who's on the Nebraska roster. I think that's when this stuff comes into the play, the care factor, the mat drills, the team bonding. But it's only one small piece of the puzzle. Like, it's nice that Nebraska has that now, that it can boast that as an aspect in its program, a part of its program that's important. But they're going to win games and lose games for the same reasons at the end of the day that just about everybody else does. You got to build up the talent, and they're certainly working to do that.
And even though Nebraska did not have a swinging door, frequently swinging door during the early transfer portal, we still have spring football coming up. And there will be much more of a development of a depth chart. And if there's not one that is printed, there will be one that is understood, certainly in the locker room. And I would imagine that there will be a few more people who will decide, you know what, there's been an influx of talent either through recruiting that is going to get some playing time. I'm not saying what position that might be. There may be some other transfer portal people who come available. And Nebraska will continue to pursue that. And there may be more guys that just don't feel like this is the place for them anymore. They cannot compete for a top spot on a roster. So I think you're going to see, players and maybe more known players who will depart the program after spring football, and maybe Nebraska brings in a couple of more. Again, we've talked about this off air before. What are roster sizes going to look like? Because what is it, 110, 115 that you can bring into fall camp eventually? And with this new super division of college football that Charlie Baker, the president of the NCAA, is proposing, at some point you would think that the 85 scholarship thing is going to go away, and it's going to end up being a hard roster limit. The NFL's got 53, and then you've got a couple of guys on change on practice squads. I would bet that you might have a hard rule that says no more at any time can you top 110 or 115 or 120, something like that. And the 85 scholarships, that might go away, especially if you've got some high dollar NIL guys. Why would you give them a full scholarship when you've got some guy making burritos, for compensation that needs the scholarship?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what direction that number goes in, because I do think, you're going to need a roster cap. Nebraska right now is aiming to get its roster down to 120, and they're not succeeding at that here
No.
in this offseason as they just continue to build it up. Like, they're still up in the 140 plus range, and now you have two classes of newcomers under Matt Rule, where you've brought in 40 plus players. So 40 times 5, if guys stay 5 years, which isn't always the case, that's 200. You got to have a fairly high amount of attrition to get anywhere close to that 120 that they're aiming for. And they're looking at 120 just for like Title IX compliance matters. There aren't as many female athletes as there once was at Nebraska. They haven't loaded up the swim team with like a pseudo varsity roster that can help tilt the scales in allowing the football team to carry 160 players. Those days are gone. Trev Alberts has done away with that. Like, everyone who's on a roster for a Division I sport at Nebraska is an actual Division I athlete, which hasn't always been the case. So I don't know. Honestly, what they're going to do to get it down. Not necessarily this year, but not too far in the future. And then if the NCAA comes in with a hard cap, it's probably going to be even lower than what Nebraska wants it to be. So hard decisions will have to be made, and it's going to put competition at a premium.
And I think it's going to be a phased-in thing too. And they're really not talking about that. I'm just bringing this to the table because how are you going to continue? As Mitch said, you do the math, you could be upwards of 200 people over the course of a certain period of time. But you just look at you just look at it and go, look, at some point, if there's going to be this super division and whatever it's going to be called, or the College Football Association 2.0, that goes back in time, where the presidents or whomever gets together and says this is going to be the number, that'll probably be a phase in implementation to where, okay, if you are at 170. You really got to get it under control now. Next year it'll be get it to 150, then maybe 145, 140, 110. It's not going to be like, okay, next year, boom, you got to get it down to, roster cutting time like they do in the NFL, and it's going to be hard and fast and quick. It'll be a phase in where maybe the players who are in the system now will be long gone before it actually gets implemented. But it has to be done.
And who it may end up hurting, unfortunately, we just got done talking about building relationships all over the state of Nebraska. Who it might end up hurting is the fullback from Fairbury.
What?
Who, the fullback, let's say the fullback from Brainerd. There have been a few of those guys who ended up having a decent career at Nebraska, but they may not be able to take those guys because if you've only got spots for 110 or 115 because the governing body for college football has declared that that's the hard cap for a roster, then the players who came as walk-ons, mostly from in the state of Nebraska, there may not be room for those guys. And that's going to usher in a new era of Nebraska football. And it'll be interesting to see how Nebraska would manage, would manage that kind of dance. Like, you want to be able to show love for the entire state, but, we've got this new roster limitation that doesn't allow us to take the guy who's going to be a 2 or 3 year development project and, someday might contribute on special teams, or maybe he turns into a starter. There's some interesting times ahead.
But on the flip side, helps out the programs like Doane, Sioux Falls, UNK, Chadron State, schools like that, they're losing out on some of the in-state talent that 10 years ago was going to them. But now Matt Rule's taken, I don't want to say everybody, but you're carrying a large roster. It's going to eventually help those schools, and maybe it fosters a better relationship between those schools in Nebraska. You can call up Coach Ryan Held and say, hey, we got a guy, we like him, we don't have room for him. We'd love to have him go play for you for a couple years. If it turns out the way we all hope it does, maybe he can be a Husker someday once he does that development. You wonder what the opportunities are for the schools like that, the Midlands, the Doanes, the Wesleyans, the Chadron States, all those schools. There's some cool opportunities there, so maybe it's not all negative for football within the
What
state
you
of Nebraska.
can't lose, though, is the fullback from Brainerd kicking the ass of the 4-star from Chicago into, it's going to be like this every day. And I hearken back to yesteryear, but that's what made those teams great, was the small town Nebraska kid, for example, really pushing the dude who shows up with all the stars or all the accolades, and then kind of one moment of welcome to Nebraska by a Nebraskan or a smaller town. So from a culture interior and just how tough a football team you have, that can't be lost. You got to figure out a way to keep that.
Hey, we talked. I think we spent a whole episode last fall talking about Elliott Brown, the wide receiver from Elkhorn South, and his social media presence, and just how Nebraska put the headset on him. He traded the helmet for the headset and made road trips. Do you have room for that kind of a player in the future of college football when the NCAA is cracking down on roster size and saying, hey, you can have 110, but they can all be on scholarship, but only 110? That'll be that's just another example. There's guys like that all over the roster who maybe won't be able to earn their spots.
Average Joe Sports Show, as we move forward, can find us on YouTube and subscribe and give us a like and review. The AJ Sports Show is what you type in, the AJ Sports Pod. On Twitter and X is where you follow. Can do it that way. Spotify and iTunes for the podcast as well. Bill Doleman, Mitch Sherman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. Guys, Nebraska able to notch another win in Big Ten play. They end up blowing out Ohio State last night. It was a little ugly early, I hear. Didn't get to see. And Nebraska able to pull away from the Buckeyes, trip to Maryland. I'm going to whine for 2 seconds about an app where the game was streamed. It was not operator error before you all jump on me. It just wasn't working. I have corroboration from 2 or 3 other friends who also tried to log on last night, and it was just kind of a blinking app. You reset the Wi-Fi, so I listened to Mr. Pavelka and Jake kill it, and also followed along on my phone. Nonetheless, though, Rienk still showed out on my phone and on the audio, just like he did on Peacock last night, drilling from downtown.
Does anybody here want to speak on behalf of the NBC and defend? I mean, they need to get equal time. Like maybe this was not
Pride of Fairbury. Do you want to chime in?
Operator error situation going on here?
I believe so, because I had no problem.
You believe operator error?
Well, I've known you for 25 years, yeah.
Schmidt's an idiot. Hit on.
As somebody who would not have clothes on his back if he did not work for NBC Sports from time to time, thank God for filling my closet and my backpack and my coats. But anyway, look, I have no problem with it, and I was always amused. I have been amused by the folks who are like, I am not going to pay for that. So let's head down to the sports bar and watch it there and spend $60 on beers and wings.
Yes.
And I spent $60 for a year to get it. I watched the Purdue game, had no problem with that. I watched Ohio State, no problem with that. And I watched the Miami Kansas City playoff game on that.
Yeah.
So did I.
So
it did work.
I had no problem with it, and I find it to be a very fine channel, at least in my repertoire.
I don't have a problem with Peacock specifically. Let me lay that out there now before I go on my mini rant. I have a problem with these massive TV companies, these corporations, nickel and diming the American consumer to watch sports. I'm already paying for YouTube TV. I'm paying for Prime. I'm paying for Netflix. Now you want me to pay for Max, and you want me to pay for Peacock. You want me to pay for all this. The whole point of streaming was that it was a more cost-effective way to get entertainment as opposed to traditional television, the coordinator or cable.
Was it though?
It's no, because you add it up, and I'm probably spending 5 times more with every app I have, every subscription I have.
You go back 5 years, it was cheaper. Now it is no longer.
They upped the price.
It's less convenient. I need 10 different apps to see everything I need to see. I'm just sick and tired of them nickel and diming.
Okay.
Well, they had NBC Sports Network that I paid extra for on YouTube TV, and I got Premier League soccer games there. I got the Olympics there. I got college basketball there. And then, no. Now Premier League soccer is going over to Peacock. You got to get Peacock. Well, I don't want it now. Well, now you got to get Big Ten football games on Peacock. Now there's NFL playoff games. It's about the nickel and diming process that I don't like. Like the aspect of the NFL, what made it so great back in the day was that it was on your national networks. It was on NBC. It was on CBS. It was on Fox. You just needed an antenna to go watch. You didn't have to pay for it aside from the cost to get your antenna. They're charging more and more, and they're going to be pricing consumers out, and you're taking sports away from the general fan. That's what I dislike about we're
going to pay
the streaming model.
We can bitch and moan, but we're going to pay because we need it.
And that's the problem.
Okay,
that's the problem.
All right. It has been written in the recent months that there is a certain sports programming network that in the near future, within maybe the next couple to 5 years, it will leave the cable spectrum, and don't mean the company spectrum. It will leave the cable business and will become an online streaming service only. And the initial price tag that has been floated is $25 to $30 per month. Now, are you going to pay that?
Yeah.
Okay, and then you're going to pay for Peacock, and then you're going to pay for all the other stuff. But eventually, right now you're paying like, what, $9 on a cable bill for said sports programming network? But
haven't had cable for 6 years.
But now they're going to say $25 to have it? I mean, that's a possibility, and that'll be the initial price. If you want the premium service. But this is what, this is going to be coming here in the next 5 years or so, where some cable places are going to say, we're just going streaming completely. And you're going to pay $25, $30 per month for that. But they're not covering the institution down the block, because the institution down the block has another contract through its conference with another broadcast entity, which you don't want to pay $6 a month for, or $11 without commercials. But, I mean, it's going to continue to climb.
The other side of this is that Nebraska is part of $1 billion television and multimedia rights deal with the Big Ten that allows it to reach into its back pocket and throw up $165 million facility like it's, pocket change and then move on to the $450 million stadium renovation project that's around the corner. So, I mean, you got to take the good with the bad, and the bad is you pay $5 a month for Peacock and then can't get signed in like Schmidt. And the good is you're going to be walking into a palace at Memorial Stadium, and the players are going to be, in their hyperbaric sleep chambers and working out with state-of-the-art facilities in every corner. So, it's here, it's coming, and this is just the world that we live in now.
Yes, and next time, if there is a next time, we'll get it figured out at the Schmidt house, or I'll just call Doleman and we'll go to a bar.
Or you call Elijah and I'll get you an alternate link.
What you missed while and I'm sure that
what
Kent
didn't miss.
described this for you well, but what you missed was Rienk Mast going like 100% superhero mode. I don't know who he was imitating last night, if it was like Giannis,
Dirk,
or Dirk.
Dirk's
I mean, Rienk Mast, what the heck, man? The last two games against Rutgers, and they were on the Rienk. I think it's a home road thing. Like Rienk is like he didn't plug in his batteries when they were on the road. I think
it's a knee thing. I think he's finally feeling better.
Okay. Yeah, he wasn't running all that well the last couple of games against Iowa and Rutgers. It kind of limping up and down the court. I thought that his head-to-head with Zach Edey maybe like really took something out of him, because he took it to Zach Edey and then
disappeared against Rutgers, like a lot of people in New Jersey do sometimes. But anyway,
yeah, he was something else at PBA on Tuesday night.
And one of the things,
so if they got that guy, then they're rolling toward March.
And one of the things he said post-game, he sat down with Bardo and Collinsworth on the Peacock broadcast following the game, and he just said, whenever you have one of those games where the rim feels a mile wide, you better take advantage of it. And Hoiberg is letting him take advantage of it. The team was letting him take advantage of it. He said whenever he hit that step back in the first half, he had knocked down a couple of three-pointers, and then he hit that step back three. He said, oh, wait, I know it's going to be one of those nights. And when it's one of those nights, you better take advantage. And Rienk took full advantage last night. Just one of those nights. I don't want to say we've all had them. I know I've had one or two in my lifetime where it just feels like no matter what you do, the ball hits the bottom of the net. I compare sometimes at the bowling alley, it's the same way, where no matter how I throw it, all the pins fall down. You don't know what's going on, but you just enjoy it for a night. You take advantage because it doesn't last forever.
Speaking as somebody who once scored 10 points one night, I can relate, as well as being, as Schmidt knows, greatest free throw shooter percentage-wise in the Bob Devaney Sports Center history. I can relate to the kind of night that he had. I think we can all agree that Rienk Mast is the best player from the Netherlands that Nebraska's had since Richard Van Polgeest.
We need a Polgeest reference. I'll say it. This game, though, last night, Ohio State came out, punched Nebraska in the face. There wasn't the energy, and you had a couple of guys, Sammy Hoiberg, shout out, diving on the floor. Things flipped. And by the time I got home, Rienk had gone on a personal 6-0 run. Nebraska took the lead and seized control of that 450 mark. Here comes the run. And there's this explosion that happens by Nebraska at PBA. They didn't keep it going against Northwestern. That was tight. But again, they have the ability to blow people out at home. Doesn't matter if you're Purdue or, in last night's case, Ohio State, who looked great early, their first 10 minutes or so. And then things set in, and Nebraska had Rienk get hot and C.J. Wilcher get hot, yeah. And Nebraska rode both of them. They didn't see or hear much from Tominaga, didn't need him. And Nebraska found a way without Juwan Gary to play tough, win the battle on the glass, and now they just got to let it travel to the Washington, D.C. area this Saturday. But Nebraska fans are feeling good. There's this yin-yang that keeps going on with the fan base, and we're not even to February, about dancing or not, because they want it so bad, and totally get it, because this is a fun team. This is as good a team as they've had since Miles, second to last year. That team kind of got screwed out of a tournament. And then you go back from a record standpoint. I mean, you're referencing some of Knee's best teams, the Tony Farmer era, or the team that followed up with that with a tournament berth as well. So, no, I mean, you've got talent, you've got options, and you've got guys that keep getting better. I'm happy for Fred because he's made the switch, he's made the shift, and the last couple of teams he's had buy-in, and they've been gritty. They're not perfect, but they're fun to watch, and people love the effort.
And there's two things that I don't want to get swept under the rug here. You mentioned one of them. C.J. Wilcher had an impact last night that I think people might forget because of the Rienk Mast game. I mean, he turned it into the Dutch Steph Curry last night. But C.J. Wilcher came off the bench, and his development since he has showed up at Nebraska has been incredible. He goes from a guy that as soon as he put a shot up, his first year at Nebraska, you were scared. You're like, oh man, C.J. Wilcher's got the ball in his hand. He's feeling it. That's not good for Nebraska. He's turned into a guy that not only do you love seeing on the floor, he's a guy you want to shoot more. And if you would have told me that 2 years ago, I would have called you crazy. His development under Fred Hoiberg has been fantastic.
Wasn't he starting back then?
He was.
Yeah.
He was.
Coming
And
off the bench.
He's
Vinny
embraced
Johnson
that, right?
now, man.
He's embraced that role coming off the bench. He turns into a guy that has confidence with his stroke. Hit that mid-range jumper last night, followed up by the side step three that really got Nebraska rolling whenever they're down by 10 early. Then Rienk Mast goes and turns it on. So I don't want to let C.J. Wilcher get swept under the rug. Also, the impact of the student section being back in the building last night was an impact that I don't think can necessarily be quantified, but you could feel them from the TV broadcast to Bonner, the Ohio State player, missing three straight free throws on that foul. He got fouled in the corner, gets to the line. The student section starts chanting Bonner, but they do it with a slight mispronunciation.
It was an anatomical reference.
Yeah, an anatomical reference. That's good. Take the N out of Bonner, and you know what I'm saying. They started chanting that. The guy misses three straight at the line, and all the momentum's in the favor at Nebraska at that point because Rienk Mast is starting to turn it on at that point. Like, I don't want their contribution to get swept under the rug because they were fantastic last night, and you could feel the juice in that building. That's the type of student section and the type of crowd that not many college basketball players in America get to experience. Like, you're talking about the likes of Duke and North Carolina and Kansas and schools like that get to play in front of a home crowd like that consistently. Student section brought it last night. The Husker fans brought it last night, and you can see how differently this Husker basketball team plays when the crowd's behind them and the momentum's on their side.
Somebody on Twitter last night, and I was just frantically searching to try to find it. I thought it was John Rothstein, and he was tweeting about the game, but couldn't find that tweet. But somebody suggested, I think it was in a joking manner, but that if Nebraska could play the NCAA tournament at home, that the Huskers would win the national championship. Like that they're that.
The studio hosts on Peacock last night mentioned that. They said if Nebraska got to play at home in the NCAA tournament, they'd be your national champions. They said that on the Peacock broadcast. I'm like, wow, that's the curse of death.
Thanks for telling me.
Okay, maybe maybe I heard it on Peacock and was confusing it with the social media. But it's really intriguing with this team how good it is at home, and now they go on the road. They've got 3 of the next 4 on the road. So you're at Maryland, Illinois, and Northwestern between now and February 7th. And the one time they're home is the Badgers from Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. And that's the team in the Big Ten that looks like it might be immune to the PBA magic. We'll see. So this is going to be a very telling 4-game stretch. Every time, the next 4 games, I think 3 of the next 4 after this 4-game stretch are back at home. So it evens out. But, it's probably not too much of a stretch to say that Nebraska's March hopes are largely going to be determined on what happens in this next 4-game stretch. If they can find a way to split or win 3 of these next 4 somehow, when you're on the road 3 times and have Wisconsin at home, then they're going to be sitting in a real nice position going into the middle of February.
But I'll also add, following this 4-game stretch, you have a real chance to go on a run before the Big Ten tournament and before a potential NCAA tournament berth. I'm with you, Mitch. Like, I think getting to 2-2 over this next 4-game stretch would be a massive win for this Husker basketball program. 3-1, don't want to call it pipe dream, but that'd be incredible based on how we've seen this team play away from home. 1-3 would be disappointing, but I think it'd still be, you'd probably have a road win in there. Maybe you get the Wisconsin win. Either way, you're probably getting some sort of moral victory there. If you can go 2-2 through this next 4-game stretch, though, you have a real chance to only drop 2-3 games down the stretch, depending on how they play on the road. Your schedule sets up really nicely for you to end the season, just in terms of gettable opponents.
Those next 4, I don't like at all. Maryland is tough. They should be better. Illinois is top 10. They're a 3 seed. Northwestern's an 11, 10 seed, and they're super talented with a little payback on their mind. And Mitch, you nailed it. Wisconsin is pretty much immune in the Big Ten to, even though they escaped last night by 2, they didn't drop a game. They had 1, right? They're just so good from the outside and good on the inside. So, I don't like these next 4, but maybe Nebraska keeps surprising.
I think you look at the last 4. If Nebraska knocks off Wisconsin at home, I think the other 3. Look, a win over Wisconsin, given what Nebraska's done already this season.
It's a 2 seed
I
right
think
now.
you're talking about Nebraska being in the tournament with a win over Wisconsin. Unless there's a complete collapse down the stretch, right? And I know Danny's team had that, but went on the run in the NIT. But anyway, but you look at the last 4 games.
For February.
Nebraska has Minnesota at home. That's the loss that is going to haunt them along with the Rutgers game. But the loss of Minnesota will be haunting. But you have a chance to rectify that with a game at home. You go to Ohio State, who played after 10 minutes yesterday like they didn't realize there was 30 more minutes and they just didn't want to be there anymore.
Yeah.
They just did not seem like, and maybe it was the crowd. I don't know. They didn't expect that people might be, on them a little bit. But they just did not seem like there was a lot of want to. Their coach is on the hot seat, and they had no answer for Jack Sikma Jr. I mean, it was shout out to my friends who dropped that reference last night. But anyway, you got Minnesota. You go to Ohio State, and you would think they'd be a little bit more motivated, but you end with Rutgers at home. That's another one that you have a chance to get some revenge. And you end the season at Michigan. Okay, it's a road game. Maybe it's Juwan Howard's last game, but that's a team that's in.
They're a nightmare.
They're wandering aimlessly through the course of the season, which is shocking given the way his tenure there started. But you have 4 games at the end where you should at least go 3-1 going into the conference tournament. And if they do go 3-1 and 500 the rest of the way with the games beforehand, I still think a win over Wisconsin is good enough. But finishing strong, going into Big Ten play and not playing on day 1, that's definitely a tournament team, and I'm booking the Sweet 16.
When was the last time Nebraska had a bye in the first round of the Big Ten tournament?
Ooh, probably.
You have to go back to that
It was the Big 8
year.
Probably 2017, 2018, right?
Yeah, it was the year that they won 20 plus and got snubbed. Yeah, under Tim Miles.
So that would have been my freshman year of college. So yeah, 17, 18.
Stop.
Yeah.
Average Joe
Kids.
Sports Show. Can find us on Twitter at AJ Sports Pod, at AJ Sports Show on YouTube. Subscribe there. Subscribe Spotify, iTunes, where you get the podcast. Mitch Sherman, Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. Guys, we'll wrap here with a little NFL. We're down to the AFC, NFC Championship, and you've got Brian Callahan getting the nod for the Titans. We'll know about Harbaugh maybe by the end of the week, maybe by later today when this thing posts. But Zach Taylor's losing his offensive coordinator, and that was such a team with Callahan and Zach Taylor in Cincy with Joe Burrow. That's interesting, and that's a name that I didn't really imagine in the running when you look at all the names for a head coaching job. But Tennessee must have liked what they saw in Brian Callahan.
Is Dad going with him?
Well, that's the talk. That's what Will Compton's asking. And if I'm junior, I'm absolutely hiring Dad because he's still an amazing O-line coach. Is he still in Cleveland?
He is, yeah. I think there was a report out last week when Brian was up for a number of jobs that Bill was going to stay in Cleveland, but things change, and now Brian is a head coach, and I'm sure the pull will be strong to want to go coach for his son. What's got to be toward the end of his career. I mean, Bill Callahan has got to be
60s, 70 age-wise.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I don't. He's well into his 60s, I think, at this point. So, and we talked about this on our last episode, just the connections with the Callahans, and Brian was not in Lincoln, but that's where his parents lived, and he would come home and spend time in Lincoln when he was off school from UCLA, and just everything that came as a result of those 4 years that Bill was in charge. And some of it was Zach Taylor getting experience in a major college football role, and ultimately connecting with Mike Sherman because he married Mike Sherman's daughter and met her at Nebraska, and that got him jump started in coaching. So here we are with another move that comes as a result of that, and the Tennessee Titans have got Brian Callahan. So something for people who like to study that kind of history around here to watch.
I have a great welcoming gift that the University of Nebraska could send to the Callahan family if they're off to Tennessee. There's a big rock outside North Stadium.
Ah, yes.
I think you can send that. They can set it up for the players down in Tennessee. I think it'd be great. I think it would really show that Nebraska cares about this move and that Nebraska is with the Callahans in this time as
The Pound the Rock rock.
Oh yeah, you know exactly which rock I'm talking about.
Yeah, I heard a story about the rock this fall.
Where was it? That was good.
It's still there. It's still there. It's outside of the Hawks Center now. It's no longer got the Pound the Rock placard on it, but it's still there. Most people have no idea. And why would you have any idea at all that once was the rally cry for Bill Callahan's team at Nebraska, and they had to pound the rock when they walked out of the locker room. But,
what's also kind of forgotten about is the fact that Bill Callahan actually did coach at Nebraska. I mean, you look back in time, and you talk about Osborne, then the Solich, and then all of that. And then the tumult with Bo Pelini, and then Mike Riley and Scott Frost, and now everything seems to be going in the right direction with Matt Rule. But if you were to go back 20 years, there are people who have forgotten about the fact that Bill Callahan actually did coach at Nebraska. Believe it.
20 years ago this month was the anniversary of his hiring and the end of the 41 days in the wilderness for Steve Peterson.
Well, and it's a little bit like it's forgotten because it's really Callahan.
Forgettable.
It's only his coaching. It's his only coaching failure, pretty much. When you look back at his stops in the NFL, he's been a great offensive line coach. Led his team to the Super Bowl back in the day.
Yeah, we heard.
Nebraska.
Don't ask his team about his Super Bowl year.
No, but he took him to the Super Bowl. You look back.
The next year wasn't quite as good.
Nebraska is really his only true coaching failure where he didn't ever find success. And I guess he had the one season. Was that 2004?
Five and 6 they won. They
did well.
They went bowling.
I guess they made it to the Big 12 championship game that year.
They did.
Guys, we'll go ahead.
He's 67, by the way. Okay. Fact checking here.
That works.
Might have a couple years left. I mean, I think he can go till 70. Coach for. I think he should go coach for Brian. That's my. I'm putting my word on that. I think he should. I think Bill should. I'm sure he's gonna tune into the Average Joe Sports Show here and just keeping tabs on things back in.
He's got great memories of the Average Joe Sports Show.
Like Zach Taylor, remember?
But without Bill Callahan at Nebraska, without Bill Callahan's years at Nebraska, there is no Ndamukong Suh at Nebraska. There is no Zach Taylor at Nebraska. So
no Harrison Beck at Nebraska. Yeah, some good. I think it would be a great chapter for that story, and it reminds me a little bit of Monty Kiffin and Lane Kiffin, and when Monty was much more up in his years and still spry enough to coach, that he helped Lane out.
Yeah.
I think that would be a nice touch, because Callahan, by all accounts, is still very active in what he does in the NFL. It's not like it's a swan song that they just keep him around like Tom Moore, who continues to roam sidelines as an offensive line guru. Callahan's still at it. So as Brian Callahan embarks on his head coaching career, why not tap into Dad's expertise and fatherly guidance? I think that'd be a great story.
Guys, we'll wind it down. We'll talk to you next time. The Average Joe Sports Show. Give us a follow on Twitter, the AJ Sports Pod.
Can we quickly, though, before we get out, make our predictions of which two teams will be playing in the Super Bowl? Because we'll know next time we talk. I'm curious, because I could see any one of these teams getting in.
Give me Kansas City, San Fran. Going to go with one upset. Going to go with one favorite.
Is that what the script says?
I am looking now. Roger just sent it. Yeah.
Baltimore and Detroit.
I'm going to go Baltimore and San Francisco.
Kansas City, Detroit.
Okay.
Detroit, okay.
Be all right. It'd be all right.
I think we all said something different.
And that's what I think the intrigue around conference championship weekend is this weekend is. I think the chips may fall in any which way, and it wouldn't surprise anybody.
I think Chubba Purdy's wayward travels through the transfer portal have affected his brother. and he's not able to concentrate adequately enough, and that's why he didn't play to his potential. So now that he's landed at Nevada, maybe he will. Maybe Brock will be a little bit.
Reason.
Yeah, maybe Brock will be a little more focused.
But we will say goodbye. Thanks for tuning in. Spotify, iTunes, and give us a subscription. Mitch Sherman, Bill Doleman, Elijah Herbel, Chris Schmidt. Talk to you next time.